Bitcoin is the only crypto coin that can tell us where we are in the cycle and what we could expect to see. So in this video, we're going to talk mainly about Bitcoin, and we're going to talk about price predictions in the coming weeks and months and what I think is likely to happen. So let's go on to a Bitcoin chart. I'm on a 2 daily chart here at the moment, so we can zoom out a good bit. And I've been looking at this chart a lot more over the last few days to try and kind of work out where we are. Like I said earlier in the video, the reason we need to know where we are with Bitcoin is because, for example, in the previous cycle, you can see the final top was second week of November 2021. So if you look at any of the major crypto coins, like for example Solana, if you have a look at where the peak price was last time, it was the same. It was actually a few days earlier in November 2021, and then after that it absolutely collapsed from 250 odd all the way back down to $8. One of the best ways I found to kind of work out where we might be is to look at the structure, and we've got a lot of information there from the lows which we saw in November 2022. So we've got all of this move going up, and all I'm trying to work out, and I'll show you this on kind of a mini scale, for example this move here. So any of these moves that are impulsive, they happen in 5 waves. And 5 waves, usually the middle wave is the longest one. And what you're trying to work out when you zoom out here is, where are we? And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Are we near the end? Are we the beginning of the end, so the final leg up? Or are we even a little bit earlier? So we've got literally another 6 to 12 months to go off this particular cycle. Or are we in a never-ending bull market? Like, nobody could say for sure. But again, in my videos, I like to talk about reality and what's most likely, what's probable. So that's what we're going to focus on. And the first thing I want to show you is, if you use TradingView here and you go to the left, click on projection and you scroll down and click on date range. Now the true low of the previous cycle was all the way back in December 2018, early January 2019. From there, we can go to the first peak, which some people believe was the true high. Even though it wasn't technically the high in terms of price, you could argue that this whole other move was a kind of flat correction downwards. And then we can trace this bar to the lows we saw in November 2022. Where does that tally up to? So if you have a look at the line here, it tallies up very nicely to this January top we saw, this local top, which I personally thought was a good argument to the top of the cycle. Now you've seen clearly in recent weeks we've actually gone above that. So what does that mean? Well, let's have a look at the other peak, which was actually higher than the one previous. So same thing again, we're just tracing that out and then we drag it to the lows. Why this is important is because the range of the crypto cycles of the ones that we've seen since Bitcoin has existed have been roughly similar, give or take, several days here or there. And if you have a look at the cycle, you can see now that the end date is very close. So kind of early September, it's possible we could have a top if it was the exact same length as the previous cycle. Obviously, it's not going to be the exact same, but what if it's very similar? That would suggest we could be very, very close to a top. Now, why is the price gone higher? Well, if you have a look at the previous cycle, you can see that the second high, even though it was a 3-wave corrective looking move, which is one way to kind of look at it, it was higher than the 63k high. So it was a higher high. So this, in my mind, I personally think is a little bit more likely is, are we seeing the same thing? Are we seeing that this was the, if you want to call it the true high, true end, and this is just a little kind of kickback, 3-wave move, and then we slip into a bear market? Could it be the same again? Now, in terms of time frames, in terms of structure, it's possible. But if that is going on, I need to see that up to here, did we do a clear 5-wave move? Now, if you click on the right button here, right click here, and you click on a log chart, sometimes you can see the chart a little bit better. So now I'm zooming in again on this log chart, and now I can see again November 2022 lows. What I can see here is a clearer pattern to what could be 5 waves here. Because it's very common for a 4th wave to be complex and sideways. As we saw here, this went on for months, if you remember, from March 2024 all the way to August, September 2024. Very, very common for a 4th wave. And you can see in the 3rd wave as well, it's clearly separated. This is one possibility. Even in what I think is the 3rd wave in the middle, if I actually have a look at some of the fib relationships, you'd expect the first extension, the 1618, to be here. So this actually kind of tallies up as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. in the middle here. So it lines up really nicely. And I still think this is the most likely scenario. But what are the other ones that you need to be aware of? And, a couple of them are extremely bullish. And those scenarios basically take into account not what's going on this cycle, but what's going on long term with Bitcoin price. So if you zoom out even more now, let's go into a weekly and let's go back to what price has been doing in previous cycles. And you can see it's just an incredible chart the whole way up. Yes, we've had massive corrections along the way, but the issues previously, I'm not going to go into it too much, is the peak in December 2017, it overlapped with the lows we saw in November 2022, which creates a bit of an issue in terms of where we are in the larger, call it a super cycle, call it whatever you want, but in the larger, bigger super cycle. Where are we in that? Like, are we towards the end and it's going to be a longer bear market this time? Very, very hard to say. But the thing with the overlap is what it suggests is we actually could be maybe even earlier, and we could be on maybe the cusp of, might not be this cycle, might be next cycle, but could be on the cusp of some crazy vertical move where once, maybe in 2026, we get to 200,000 and then we just go in a straight line to 500,000. Who knows? Who knows? But remember, have to be realistic. That's not necessarily realistic. But again, we're considering all the options that the chart is actually showing us. And the chart for Bitcoin is quite bullish. Let's talk about multiples, because this is the other thing you need to be aware of if you're doing your TA properly. Again, looking at previous cycles, what do we know from the previous cycle? We went for 3,000 to around 60,000. So that was basically a 20x. So again, if you click on the projection tool here, if you want to be accurate, click on price range. And then scroll low to high 2000%, so 20x. And every previous cycle, what's happened is you've gotten diminishing returns. So if you were to guess what the returns would be this cycle from low to high, what would you guess? Well, it'll be less than a 20x from the lows. Bitcoin might be 10 to 12x, something like that. Where were the lows? The lows were at 15K. Let's do the price multiples again. So if we were to get a 10x, so that will take us to around 150K. We're not a million miles away from there. We've already touched, I think it was 123. Not a million miles away from there. We're going to zoom into the chart in just a minute to get a better gauge of where we might be in that. But if we were doing something a little bit less, like an 8x or something like that, let's say, then we would be topping out at about 123. We've already hit a 8x. 9x would be something like a 137K. So that gives you an idea. So if this is continuing, and it could be possible because Bitcoin is very, very mainstream now, then we should expect a price to top very, very soon. And we should expect most of the altcoins to top with them wherever they are in their charts. And we'll have a glance at a couple in a minute. Let's get back to a normal chart and let's zoom into price action recently. So from the April lows. So I'm now on a 4-hourly chart, so we can zoom in. And what I think is going on here is if it's doing the same thing which we've seen before. If it isn't, then we'll talk about that in just a minute. If it's doing the same thing, then we could get a 3-wave move here. Again, use fib relationships because we have a lot of structure to work with now. So where might we top? So let's say that low is in there and we've started the next move up, which it does look like. 618 would have been the immediate target, but we've already kind of wicked through that and we look like we could continue. Another potential target is 1-to-1 to keep an eye on as well, 135. And also, doesn't always have to perfectly respect fibs, but the other thing is just have a look at the structure from the June 21st low. This looks like a clear wave here. So again, fib relationships. This looks like a perfect 1618, right? So that's excellent. So what that looks like is, could this be a 1, 2? Clearly demarcated 3 here. So 1, 2, 3. And we're messing about doing a 4 now. So we might just take out the 116 lows or something like that, whatever. And then we'll just do one final swing. That's the top there. Literally the top of the cycle. Is that possible? In my opinion, this lines up nicely with everything I've talked about in terms of Bitcoin's history. The chart lines up really nicely. Everything looks good for this to do one final swing. We get a bit of bearish divergence and we could call it a day there. Is there a chance it's already done? Probably not. It looks like that is a 4. Remember the 4 we talked about before last year from where was it, March all the way to August. It's like this kind of complex sideways thing. We're probably tracing that out and it might take a little bit longer. Good thing is, while it's just going sideways, some of the alts, some of them could run a little bit and complete what they need to complete. But that's what I think is going on. Now, what is a more bullish scenario? Let's talk about that. Let's say it's something a lot more bullish, which is, again, always possible. So let's zoom back out to a 2 lady. The other ways to look at this, neither of which I particularly like, but it's possible, is you can look at this as a 1-2 or look at this as a 1-2. And if you're doing it either way, that way, again, just crude kind of analysis here, we should expect this now. So we're like really, really early along that move. That's what it suggests. And I'm not really entertaining that because that wouldn't make sense to me, but I can't rule that out because who knows? With everything that's going on and ETFs and, money printing, stuff like that, who knows for sure? Who can predict for sure? And just if, it might not make sense that Bitcoin's going to 200K while most of the altcoins look not very good. But Bitcoin dominance has been so superior this entire cycle that wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me to see all altcoins dump and Bitcoin go in a straight line up. That wouldn't be weird given what we've seen in the last 12 to 24 months at all. So you can't definitely rule this out either. But the important thing for most of you watching who are like me, are trading various altcoins, you've got to be realistic with some of these targets. That very likely could have been a top for Solana, for example, in January. That's realistic. This could just be a corrective move sideways and then we go lower. That's more realistic. Stronger coins, like I've discussed in my recent videos, hopefully you've been watching them, things like Pengu, brilliant structure. Like this looks very, very bullish. 1, 2, 3, hopefully 4, 5, and we swing up again. Brilliant trade this has been. And it's just because it's a bullish looking chart. But as I've said before, stick to the bullish looking charts. It's AVAX, not a bullish looking chart. There's no way this is going anywhere near all-time highs. Or, extremely low probability anyway. Stick to the handful, it's only a handful of bullish charts if you're trading altcoins. But be wary, that's my point in this video. Be wary, because realistically, if you have one more swing up, and that's your lot, then, like I said before, I think in the coming few weeks, it could be curtains. Even though, when we saw in 2023, September, October were good months for crypto. Just be very, very careful. And a quick tip when it comes to kind of trying to work out, there's many ways you could do it, but work out, if an altcoin is going to give you decent multiples. This is just a random, old altcoin, EOS. What you want to do is have a look at the multiples. Like when it did it, any kind of previous run. Some of these Dino coins, for example, back in kind of early December 2024 had a decent run. Have a look at the multiples. What was it? 2x, 3x. What was it compared to some of the other coins? And then always, if you can, zoom out of the chart. Because a lot of these coins, 99% of all coins, they're so bad that they're shorted heavily. And the thing is, you can get these extreme short squeezes where quickly shorts are liquidated and you can get vertical price action. But that doesn't mean it's a good coin or it's going anywhere. And nearly always that will fade. This is why I've not been holding a lot in this cycle. I've been quickly taking profits. I've learned that from meme coin trading because you kind of have to do that. And don't forget to zoom right out. So if you zoom right out, so I've shown you some multiples here on EOS, zoom right out, have a look at how bad this chart is long term. This is a horrible, horrible chart to get involved with and get caught on. Take quick profits, get out. If you're trading any of these Dino coins, but be very careful. If you see anything breaking out on a run, like this is another horrible coin, but fresh lows, making a bit of a run, and this is one I've been involved in because the structure on a very low time frame is looking nice and bullish. And another tip for any of these that you think could break out, look for areas where there's previous resistance and its price is accumulating sideways like this before a breakout. A lot of chop, a lot of people kind of getting whipsawed out of the position, but look for that accumulation underneath and then you get these very, very nice breakouts. You can day trade these, and what you want to see with these is higher lows along the way, higher lows, but mostly sideways, but it's like a spring, a coil. Price constricting under it in very important levels, and then we get sudden vertical move. And these vertical moves, if you get involved in the price anywhere in here, at the highs, that's 40%. And this is 40% not in like months or years. This is literally, what is it? Hours. And people sometimes mention in the comments and they're like, oh, but you said some of these altcoins were over. Yeah, they are over. This is nothing but a bear market rally. So again, zoom out. This is a bear market rally. So in these completely dead coins, they occasionally get a bit of life and they do a little bit of a run, but then they completely fade that move. They take out the lows, take out the lows, take out the lows, completely fade those moves. But these, when they run, they're good multiples. So if you got involved anywhere here, for example, in October, I mean, there were much better altcoins back then, so you wouldn't have touched this, but still, you're doing 2x, 3x, maybe more. And because some of these moves, like I said, the 40% ones happen in, a couple of days or hours to days, you could do that, take profits, rotate into another altcoin. Now this is tricky business. Like, this is not easy to do. Like, if you want to, something like XRP, you can hold and wait for the, literally in this consolidation period, you can wait for the breakout to happen, and then maybe it'll go sideways again, but you could just hold and wait. That's okay too, and you'll make some decent multiples. But it all depends on your time, your trading experience. Like, if you held XRP from beginning of January to now, it's the same price, but during this time period, there are some really amazing opportunities in alts and major memes as well. Hope that helps. Thanks for listening.